Start recording. Okay, so welcome to fibrous tumors. Let's get ourselves dusted off here. And Manuel, you want to start us?
DFSP.
So why DFSP?
Well, it's all over. Proliferation is extending to the periphery, to the fat,
Yeah, and it's
parallel type of infiltration.
so in the fat you're getting some parallel strata, very coarse honeycomb pattern into the fat, and you have a storiform pattern in the dermis, woven pattern with alternating very skinny dark nuclei and very pale oval nuclei. It's the same nucleus that is disc-shaped, and in alternating fascicles you're either looking at it on FOSS or you're looking at it at an angle. So that nuclear characteristic is also very characteristic of DFSP. Very good. Let's start. There's some others here. So we're going to pull into focus. Excellent. So calcifying aponeurotic fibroma. So calcifying aponeurotic fibroma, you have fascicles that tend to run in a common direction, not the interlacing storiform fascicles. And you have the palisades around calcifying centers, very characteristic for calcifying aponeurotic fibroma, which may shock you but tends to occur on the aponeurosis. So where's the aponeurosis? Aponeurosis is flattened out part of a tendon, right? So commonly palmar sole is where you see that. So you get to pass or play. There's no shame in passing at this point.
Play.
Play!
Now I try.
Well done. Okay, so you're going to play. Go ahead.
It's kind of DF.
Yeah, so it looks, there's certainly overlying acanthosis, and if you have a fibrous tumor with overlying acanthosis, you got a fairly good bet that it's dermatofibroma to begin with. Then you look for sclerotic areas, and DFs tend to have nice round collagen balls with curved comma-shaped nuclei, so-called black dolphins jumping over red beach balls. That pattern, so-called curlicue pattern, is very characteristic for a sclerotic variant of dermatofibroma. Very good. So pass or play? Pass. That's okay. Okay, Mark.
Pass. I can't do that yet? All right.
Points for Huber and 1 for slide.
All right, so I see
they let you do that on the board exam.
Yeah.
You can pass.
1 and 5, right?
Go ahead.
In a faced epidermis, I see spindle cell. I think what I figured is here are spindle cells.
So effaced.
The reedy ridges are.
So the reedy ridge pattern is gone. So is it then skinny and effaced, or is it a plate-like acanthosis
That looks like a.
where it's actually as thick as the bottom of the reedy pegs would be?
Yes, it is as thick as the bottom of the reedy pegs would be.
So it's a plate-like acanthosis, which tends to be characteristic of?
It's not coming to me.
So acanthosis over a fibrous tumor,
Just a DF. Oh,
dermatofibroma,
Okay, yeah.
and then do you know anything that's a cousin to a dermatofibroma that has these pyramid-shaped stellate?
The pleomorphic, right? Or no?
Well, pleomorphic has them, but they tend to be hyperchromatic. The other one,
Angio?
yeah, angiofibromas have them, and epithelioid histiocytomas have them.
Okay.
So, epithelioid histiocytoma is a factor 13A positive dendritic cell that tends to be pyramid shaped, triangular with elongated processes, but it shares with dermatofibroma the overlying acanthosis. So epithelioid histiocytoma. That one.
Very large invading fat. I think I'm thinking DFSP.
So invading fat and leaving fat in single file rows of lipocytes, which when you see that is almost always DFSP. So single file row of lipocytes, and then you can look for grins and chuckles to see if it has a storiform pattern. This one is myxoid in areas, and myxoid DFSP are often recurrent DFSP, and they often lose their CD34 positivity in the areas and can resemble neurofibroma but are S100 negative.
So it's already sarcoma?
So it is DFSP, not with fibrosarcomatous dedifferentiation, but just myxoid change.
So it's also lost their CD34.
Correct. So CD34 loss can happen with fibrosarcomatous dedifferentiation and DFSP, but also just in myxoid DFSP. That's one of the pitfalls, is that it is negative for CD34.
All right. So, a large fibrous growth. It looks like there's maybe some hemorrhage, or I don't know if that's hemosiderin.
So there's hemosiderin, kind of a golden brown pigment, and you can see if you go higher power and flip down your condenser, you can see how refractile it is, how it twinkles at you. Melanin doesn't twinkle, and hemosiderin does. It's refractile. So the slight greenish yellow hues to the brown and the refractility tell you that it's hemosiderin, not melanin. And then
I'm looking for like osteoclast like cells potentially, or so they are. So yeah, I guess this is a giant cell tumor of soft parts.
yeah, so giant cell tumor of tendon sheath, giant cell epilis in the jaw, giant cell tumor of soft parts is all the same tumor, right? So when it's on the tendon sheath, you call it giant cell tumor of tendon sheath. When it is in the jaw, you call it a giant cell epilis. When it's out in the soft parts, you shockingly call it giant cell tumor of soft parts, or pigmented villonodular tenosynovitis when it sits adjacent to a joint space. It's all the same tumor. And it's characterized by these plump fibroblasts. They're kind of oval. So sheets of oval, plump fibroblasts, mature collagen, osteoclast-like giant cells. What do you call it if it's missing the osteoclast-like giant cells? Fibroma of tendon sheath. So fibroma of tendon sheath is exactly the same tumor, missing the osteoclast-like giant cells. What do the cells look like in fibroma of tendon sheath? They're the same oval fibroblasts that you get in giant cell tumor of tendon sheath. So you don't, by and large, get spindle fibroblasts. You get round to oval fibroblasts that are plump in both giant cell tumor of tendon sheath and fibroma of tendon sheath. Very good. Everyone has survived Turkey and is surviving fibrous tumors. That's pretty good.
Okay.
So deep nodule, kind of pale, sometimes with an amphiphilic or bluish hue, and large, stellate.
Polymorphic.
So they're identical to the fibroblasts that you see in pleomorphic fibroma. So it wouldn't be wrong to call this pleomorphic fibroma, but when it has the blue hue and it has the same fibroblasts in a large hypocellular nodule, desmoplastic fibroblastoma is a term used for that. So it's related to pleomorphic fibroma. It's benign. The fibroblasts tend to be CD34 positive, but large and stellate. And it has a hypocellular nodule, often with a pale amphiphilic hue. So desmoplastic fibroblastoma, or I'm sorry.
Collagenous.
Oh, collagenous fibroma is another term for that. That is true. Although that's also used for sclerotic fibroma sometimes.
Adult myofibroma.
Adult myofibroma. So you have these bluish nodules. They tend to have the same color to them as desmoplastic fibroblastoma, but instead of being a very uniform hypocellular tumor, you have hypocellular blue nodules surrounded by highly vascular spindle cell proliferation that is hypercellular, often with antler-like vascular spaces resembling so-called hemangioparasitoma. So you get those hemangioparasitoma-like hypercellular areas surrounding these hypocellular bluish nodules. That's characteristic for an adult type of myofibroma. Juvenile myofibroma tends to be uniformly pink and doesn't have the surrounding hypercellular areas.
It's big.
It's big.
You know that's probably a DFSP.
So it does look DFSP-like, and you'd want to know how it started life. It also, though, has lots of dense cellular foci. So you'd want to see, number one, are they neutrophils? Because if they're neutrophils, this could be a huge erythema levatum duodenum, right? UGED lesion, as in a patient with HIV. If they are lymphoid, then you look for virion type cells that look kind of like Reed-Sternberg cells. And that would go with inflammatory myofibroblastic tumor. And you also want to know age and location. Right? This is certainly sun damaged and highly cellular. It has the inflammatory foci. So one thing I would get is an S100. Make sure it's not desmoplastic melanoma. Look for virion type cells for mixed inflammatory fibroblastic tumor, and this is we didn't see the virion type cells, but that's what it is, which is a lower grade sarcoma.
sclerotic from top to bottom.
Yeah, it's very sclerotic. It has a little bit of a starry night pattern.
So sclerotic fibroma.
So sclerotic fibroma, which can be a marker for what syndrome?
Cowden's.
Cowden syndrome. So starry night pattern, sclerotic fibroma, you think Cowden syndrome, and then what do people with Cowden syndrome get? Breast cancer, thyroid cancer, so important to know for that reason. Okay. So dermatomyofibroma is a reasonable thought because the eccrine glands are a little preserved. This particular example, though, has very prominent collagen balls at the periphery. And so you want to look at the pattern. If you have red balls with curved black nuclei, the black dolphins jumping over those red beach balls, then it's probably just a dermatofibroma. So you have bone, intramembranous bone formation in something that is sclerotic, and when you look at the nuclear pattern, it's definitely a corkscrew nuclear pattern, corkscrew collagen. It has, in what we're looking at, just hypocellular areas. But it might, in other areas, might be hypercellular as well. So if this were with this corkscrew fibroblast, if this were on a palm or sole,
Fibromatosis.
yeah, fibromatosis, and the one that tends to ossify is Peyronie's, so the penile variant of fibromatosis is the one that's most likely to form bone and contribute to the deformity and functional disability. So ossification can happen in any of the fibromatoses.
Am I up?
You are.
All right, so pretty. That's hypercellular, but there's a lot going on in the dermis. A lot of
So hypercellular, the overlying epidermis is attenuated or acanthotic?
I would say it's kind of more attenuated. It's kind of like it doesn't look.
It's,
You think it's acanthotic?
it's acanthotic.
Okay,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's big.
All right. Okay,
It's big, that's why.
okay, I misinterpreted your definition.
Oh,
All right.
attenuated
Yeah.
would be skinny.
Okay, got it. Yes, it is not.
It's
skinny.
fat.
Yes, agreed.
Okay.
Is it another dermatofibroma?
It is
Yeah,
another
all right.
dermatofibroma, and you get, if we were playing Jeopardy, you would get points for phrasing it in the form of a question, which is excellent. So you see the collagen balls at the periphery.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
If you look a little higher, you'll see the little black curved nuclei, the black dolphins jumping over those red beach balls. And you often have follicular or sebaceous induction, which we see at the periphery there. Very good.
I don't see much acanthosis.
Not much acanthosis. In fact, maybe it's even a little attenuated.
Okay.
And you have whorls and nodules of fibroblasts. You can see nice nodules here of fibroblasts. And so what gives you a nodular proliferation? Nodules of fibroblasts forming new collagen.
Nodular fasciitis.
So nod-fasc tends to be deep in the fascial sub-Q plane, and tends to be very loose myxoid.
Okay.
This is forming ropey collagen and forming distinct nodules is hypertrophic scar. So hypertrophic scar, ordinary scar, all the fibroblasts run parallel to the surface, the vessels run north-south. In hypertrophic scar, you have nodules forming. If it forms thick bubblegummy collagen, then it's a keloid.
Okay.
Patchy lymphocytes has DMF.
Patchy lymphocytic infiltrate you can see in hypertrophic scar as well. Anytime you see that, you worry about the possibility of desmoplastic melanoma. That would also be in your differential. Anytime you have lymphoid aggregates.
All right.
Okay.
It's me. Okay.
What do you
So
see at the periphery?
I see collagen ball trapping, and it does look
Collagen
like
ball
there's some
trapping.
plate-like acanthosis as well. So that would go more
So
with
first
the-
thing is, could this be dermatofibroma? It's quite epithelioid, but there are many different variants of DF to include an epithelioid variant. So you might stain it with a 13A and a CD34, or even a little bit of lymphoid aggregate at the periphery, so throwing in S100 or a SOX10 for desmoplastic melanoma would not be wrong.
DF.
So it looks like a dermatofibroma, and then the question is, what's overlying that dermatofibroma? Is that basal cell, or is it just basaloid induction? And most of the time, that's just basaloid induction. So it looks like a superficial BCC, but it's not going to behave like a superficial BCC. So you have that, what looks like superficial BCC, and a little bit of DF underneath it. It's a sucker slide trying to sucker you into basal cell when it's just induction over a dermatofibroma. So important pitfall, so important thing to know.
Oh, scar.
So scar, what do you think about the nuclei?
Oh, kind of sarcoma.
Yeah, so it is a spindle cell tumor, but there is
AFS.
significant atypia, so it could certainly be an atypical fibroxanthoma. There is a significant mitotic rate. So when you have an atypical spindle cell tumor slammed up against the epidermis, what is your differential?
Oh, slam.
Slam, which
Spindle cell causing screen.
so spindle cell squamous carcinoma, leiomyosarcoma, AFX,
yeah, and then
and melanoma,
Melanoma,
which so your mnemonic for a spindle cell tumor, atypical spindle cell tumor slammed up against the epidermis is SLAM. S for squame, L for leiomyosarcoma, A for atypical fibroxanthoma, M for melanoma. There are lymphoid aggregates. You would definitely want to stain it with something like a P63 or high molecular weight keratin for squame. Something for Desmin. We don't use smooth muscle actin because it's too sensitive. A third to a half of AFX has smooth muscle actin. So it's been said all God's children have smooth muscle actin to some extent. Desmond would be, or H. Cal Desmond would be more specific for leiomyosarcoma, and then something like S100 or SOX10 for desmoplastic melanoma, because stains like HMB45 are unreliable in spindled squamous cell carcinoma. And this one, if null for everything, maybe positive for procollagen 1, is AFX, atypical fibroxanthoma, which is akin to superficial undifferentiated pleomorphic sarcoma, but with a very good prognosis because of its superficial location.
So this one, again, is pretty big. And
And you see no epidermis,
Going into
probably because we're
the
pretty
fat,
deep,
yeah.
so it's going into the fat.
and splitting so it could be another DFSP.
So it could be DFSP. Is it storiform? And is it uniformly hypercellular with no pleomorphism? Because DFSP, being a translocation sarcoma, will be uniformly hypercellular with no pleomorphism. I see variation in nuclei and I see variation in density. So it doesn't really look like a translocation sarcoma.
Right.
Translocation sarcomas should be uniformly hypercellular across the field. Really no pleomorphism. All the nuclei are the same, just way too many of them and uniformly hypercellular across the field. Here I see lots of microvesiculation in the stroma. So the stroma has lots of microvesiculation, red cell extravasation, tissue culture like fibroblasts in a deep process
Nodular fasciitis.
like nodular fasciitis. But what kind of variant of nod fash grows into the septi and fat in a pattern similar to DFSP and has ganglion-like cells? That's proliferative fash. So nod fash has variants. Cranial fasciitis in the temples of kids, proliferative fasciitis being the two most common. Proliferative fash, you get ganglion-like giant cells, and it extends into the septa and fat in a growth pattern resembling DFSP. So it's like a proliferative variant of nodular fasciitis. What would you call such a thing? Proliferative fasciitis, right? So proliferative fasciitis grows into the septa and fat in a DFSP-like pattern and has ganglion cells. Otherwise, it shares the features of nodular fasciitis, which is a loose myxoid stroma, microvesiculation within the stroma, red cell extravasation, and in the immature forms, tissue culture like fibroblasts.
Digital fibrokeratoma.
So we're on acral skin, and the two things you get are superficial acral fibromyxoma and digital fibrokeratoma. The digital fibrokeratomas are angiofibromas, so they often have the same stellate cells that other angiofibromas will have. So I like this for acquired digital fibrokeratoma. If it were more myxoid, less chunky collagen, more uniform in appearance, you'd think of a digital fibromyxoma or superficial acral fibromyxoma. Good one. So fibrous papule of the face or angiofibroma, solitary angiofibroma. You see concentric collagen around vessels and around adnexal structures. Dilatation of the vessel, which is why they're often pink and why it's called an angiofibroma. Solitary angiofibroma is akin to fibrous papula of the face. Multiple go with tuberous sclerosis. Just like on the digit, a solitary is an acquired digital fibrokeratoma, and multiple are Keenan's tumors. You often get these large, more epithelioid or stellate fibroblasts that are 13A positive, and you often have large, prominent melanocytes at the junction. So you don't want to overcall a superficial shave of an angiofibroma as something melanocytic. Okay, what's this?
Calcification.
Yeah. Palisading around calcification in a fibrous tumor.
No.
So calcifying aponeurotic fibroma. Very good.
Okay. So there is, I think, bone?
Blood.
Blood, okay.
So dilated vessel, blood.
Alright.
And
Hypercellular.
hypercellular tumor. There is a little bit of lymphoid inflammation. Hypercellular tumor, some mitoses.
It's kind of like.
It's a deep soft tissue tumor.
Mhm.
And so this is angiomatoid fibrous histiocytoma, not to be confused with an aneurysmal DF. Aneurysmal DF is benign. This is a low-grade sarcoma. So unfortunately, the names overlap, right? So fibrous histiocytoma is another name for dermatofibroma. We avoid that term because there are fibrous histiocytomas in the soft tissue, like the aneurysmal one, that are low-grade fibrosarcomas. So you don't want anyone to get confused, so we call DFs DF for that reason. So what's the pink stuff?
Collagen.
Collagen. What's the amphiphilic stuff? Looks a lot like solar elastosis. So elastin.
Elastin.
Do you know any kind of elastofibroma?
Elastofibroma dorsal.
Yeah, elastofibroma dorsi. Where does it occur?
On the.
On your dorsi.
On the dorsal. Yeah, you're
Yeah,
right.
on your back. Right? That's why it's called elastofibroma dorsi. So what normally happens is you get a technetium scan for your heart, and they say the good news is your heart's fine. The bad news is you got a 40-pound tumor in your back. Right? That's elastofibroma dorsi. Right? It's been sitting there in your back for years. You weren't even aware it was there. And then it shows up on a technetium scan. And histologically, it has the amphiphilic elastin and the red collagen. And then if you look a little higher, you see all of these altered elastic fibers embedded in that amorphous elastin. So that's elastofibroma dorsi.
All right. So from here, looks like the platelet acanthosis.
Platelet acanthosis.
Yeah, and the
What does that
collagen
go
bulge
with?
wrapping at the periphery. So a dermatofibroma.
Dermatofibroma. So first off, you're allowed to have a little fine lacy extension of DF into the fat. In fact, that's exactly how DFs extend into fat. Right? So it's not the parallel rows like strata or layer cake that you get with DFSP. It's just a uniform, lacy involvement of the superficial fat that's completely normal and expected for dermatofibroma. You've got collagen balls at the periphery. If you look closer, they're probably black dolphins jumping over those red collagen balls. You have platelet acanthosis, you have follicular or sebaceous induction, it's a dermatofibroma. Hold on.
This Starry Night pattern.
So, question of whether it could represent a starry night pattern. You're only seeing a little bit of it, and those tend to be hypo or acellular. This has a lot of cells, and in fact the cells are somewhat pleomorphic with some hyperchromasia. It's pretty hypercellular.
Big fibroma.
There are at least some mitotic figures. So it is an atypical spindle cell tumor slammed up against the epidermis.
Squames.
So you'd want to get something like a P40 or P63 or keratin 903 for squamous cell carcinoma spindled, an S100 or SOX10 for the possibility of spindled melanoma, a Caldesmin for leiomyosarcoma, and if everything's negative, it's probably an AFX, atypical fibrosarcoma. So SLAM, atypical spindle cell tumor slammed up against the epidermis, your differential is SLAM. Squame, leiomyosarc, AFX, melanoma. And then you need stains to work through those things. Fairly hypocellular, but when you look at the cells that are there, they are these large, somewhat stellate gray fibroblasts that look like radiation fibroblasts. Pleomorphic fibroma. So pleomorphic fibroma, hypocellular, large stellate, radiation type fibroblasts.
So it looks like there's some space between collagen.
Space between collagen. Are there a lot of cells or not that many cells?
Not really.
Not really many cells. Tell me about the nuclei.
Ooh, kind of ugly.
Kind of ugly. And are they uniform or are they pleomorphic?
They're pleomorphic, so is it again.
Another pleomorphic fibroma, and this one comes by its name with these big, ugly-looking fibroblasts.
That's totally fine.
Totally fine. And the one of the clues is that it is hypocellular, and then very recognizable. I'll just show you one more example here. Again, it's a fairly hypocellular tumor, but look at those block nuclei that just jump out at you. They're large, they're pleomorphic, they're stellate, they look like radiation fibroblasts, but there are no mitotic figures. And that's typical for a pleomorphic fibroma. So hypocellular with radiation like fibroblasts. So we have lots of vessels.
The dilated vessels there.
It's kind of pale. And there are these multinucleated multinucleate cell angiohistiocytoma. So another benign tumor characterized by the large multinucleated histiocytes together with the dilated vessels. So keloid. You see that bubblegum-like collagen. The background is whorled and nodular like a hypertrophic scar, but superimposed on that is the red keloid collagen. So Keloid. Sclerotic fibroma. Looks like the sky in Van Gogh's Starry Night. And marker for what syndrome? Cowden syndrome. So it's sometimes called the Cowden's fibroma for that reason.
Pretty hypercellular. Oh, there's epidermis.
Here's epidermis. Where are you?
Acral skin.
Acral skin.
Um,
And the fibroblasts, are they very spindled or are they more plump and oval?
plump and oval.
And it's making lots of collagen.
Yeah.
So it's a round nodule, plump and oval, making lots of collagen, and then you have this kind of giant cell.
The giant cell of the. This is the tendon sheath.
So giant cell tumor of tendon sheath. So giant cell tumor of tendon sheath it's a nodule. It has red, ropey to thick collagen. It has, just as in fibroma of tendon sheath, the plump, uniform, round to oval fibroblasts, and the scalloped border, like an amoeba, grabbing onto things of an osteoclast like giant cell.
Epidermis looks acanthotic to me.
Yep.
I think this is just
Acanthotic,
the
and where do you think you might be?
acral skin.
Probably acral skin, and you got something with a kind of a crisscross fascicle pattern. Going in a crisscross pattern on acral skin.
Acquired digital fibrokeratoma.
Very good. Not acquired digital, you're thinking the right thing.
Oh.
Your lips just said the wrong
Oh.
one. So recurrent infantile digital fibroma. So recurrent infantile digital fibroma or inclusion body fibroma is acral skin with crisscross fascicles. So crisscross fascicles on acral skin. And that pattern is a clue to look higher. And then when you do look higher, let's get it into focus here. When you look higher, you expect to see all of these inclusions, which gives it its name, inclusion body fibroma. Its clinical behavior gives its name, recurrent infantile digital fibroma. And the diagnosis is not made at high power with inclusion bodies, but at scan, a bump on acral skin with a distinctly crisscross pattern of fascicles. So bump, acral skin, crisscross fascicles. Lots and lots of material in this chapter. They all are things you won't see every day, but they're not controversial. They test really, really well. If you didn't get them all right today, it just shows that you will in fact have to complete your entire residency. And you won't be done as of this afternoon. There's no shame in that.
Alright, so it looks like there's some areas that are hypercellular, but then also there's that are more. Let's see.
And tell me about the fibroblasts.
Yeah, so
Are they spindled?
No, they look more plump.
They look more plump. And then tell me about these giant cells.
They're multinuclear giants. They're giants. So, yeah. Oh, there's scallops. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. So probably
So they're It's a giant cell tumor.
Giant cell tumor of tendon sheath.
Oh, what are you
Very
gonna
good.
Scallops. Oh, I was like, what? I thought you were talking
No. They're scallops.
I was
One
like,
that we
wait,
have
it's
not
different
seen
than
an
that.
example of today, we've tried to get through just about everything. One we haven't seen right now is dermatomyofibroma.
Mhm.
So describe a dermatomyofibroma to me.
Corkscrew nuclei.
Corkscrew nuclei, what
Mhm.
direction do they go?
East, west.
Do they move follicles?
No.
No, DMF doesn't move follicles.
I like that.
Okay, so DMF doesn't move follicles, which means it respects all your adnexal structures. So you have your follicles and your eccrine coil just sitting there in that east-west oriented corkscrew nuclei proliferation. So DMF doesn't move follicles.
Looks like the
So it looks like DF. You said that pretty quickly. Are you sure?
yes.
Yes. And why you're sure is because you have the overlying acanthosis and a fibrous proliferation, and that's a pretty good bet that that's going to be a benign dermatofibroma. So let's see. So you have hypercellular and hypocellular areas. It's got a linear configuration and they are distinctly corkscrew in appearance.
Some kind of fibrotosis.
Yeah, fibromatosis. So depending on its location, Dupuytren's contracture, later host fibromatosis on a palm or sole, Peyronie's disease, all fibromatosis. Very good.
Kind of looks a little sclerotic fibroma.
Yeah, it looks a little sclerotic fibroma-ish, has overlying acanthosis, sort of where dermatofibroma meets sclerotic fibroma. I would look for other stigmata of Cowden's. Very good. So what are other stigmata of Cowden's?
Cancers.
Trichomonas.
Cancers in the family, trichomomas,
Acral hyperkeratosis.
and acral hyperkeratoses. Very good. Okay. We're in a mouth, and it's kind of keratotic for a mouth, probably because there's been a lot of friction, and you have these fascicles of collagen. If you get that kind of pattern on an upper back, you have a nuchal pattern fibroma, nuchal type fibroma. If you get this in the mouth, it's a submucosal fibroma. Very similar crisscross pattern of mature collagen. Okay, how about that?
So very cellular leukemia. It's deep.
So it's deep, it's a nodule, it's making red collagen. Tell me about the shape of the fibroblasts.
Rounded kind of. I think.
Round to oval. I don't see any giant cells. It's just like this across the whole field. So what is it?
Medulla fasciitis.
Or so Nodfash tends to have loose myxoid stroma and microvesiculation in the stroma. This has pretty sclerotic red collagen. It has the plump oval fibroblasts, lacks the giant cells, so just fibroma of tendon sheath. Okay, how about this? DF, acanthosis, follicular induction. Let's go up to see the follicular induction. Collagen balls at the periphery. Dermatofibroma. So it's it's all myxoid tissue and fine ropey collagen. So if there's fat, lipocytes, you'd think of a spindle cell lipoma. And if there's no fat at all, it still could be a so-called non-fat spindle cell lipoma. It could also just be a myxoma. So if there are multiple of these in the patient, and they've also had cardiac myxoma and glue nevi,
Carnes.
then they've got Carney's complex. Okay. Let's see. Just a couple more minutes. Okay, acral site, kind of uniformly cellular, amphiphilic fibromyxoid. So what would you call a superficial acral fibromyxoma?
Superficial
Acral fibromyxoma, exactly, or digital fibromyxoma. So it's just very descriptive for exactly what it looks like. Let's see what else we got here. Okay, again, you've got these intersecting fascicles. It's very hypocellular, intersecting fascicles. It's not cellular with fascicles on an acral bump like a digital fibromyxoma. It's not submucosal. This is on the upper back, so this is a nuchal type fibroma. So the nuchal type fibromas, similar to a submucosal fibroma, often have these intersecting fascicles coming in at, like V's or at right angles to one another, 45-degree angles sometimes, but a very mature collagen. So that's the nuchal type fibroma. Let's see, anything else we want to do here? Let's finish with one more here. So, deep into the fat makes you think of the possibility of DFSP, but it's very myxoid. Is there such a thing as a myxoid DFSP? There is. And is it going to stain CD34 positive? No, it loses its CD34 positivity. They're often recurrent when they become myxoid, and high power view can look very much like a neurofibroma. Okay. And with that, we are done the whirlwind through fibrous tumors.
Thank you.
Lots there. You got to go through it again and again. Go through the boxes. Go through the book again because there are a lot of tumors there.